Okay, so we've looked at loading in Webfonts, but now we're going to look at the Google Fonts API, which I really like, and this makes it really easy to load in fonts that you want to sort of trial out maybe and test before you move over to files physically located on your server. Or, of course, you could just continue using Google Fonts. You probably don't know what I'm talking about, so let's go ahead and actually look at using Google Fonts. So head over to google.com/fonts. What this basically is, it's a web font library that allows you to dynamically include fonts in all different types of weight and just put them onto your website. And it gives you three methods, I think, of sort of putting these into your website. So, a really nice font for body content is Open Sans. So let's say I really like this one. You can go ahead and play around with thickness, slant, width, things like that. But I want to use Open Sans. So I can head over here and do quick use. Now, what this will do is it will give me, for the first option, this is quite cool because it focuses on the page load, and we've already spoken a little bit about page load. I can choose the styles I want. So let's say I'm planning on having this for headers and body content, just for example. I might want the bold 700 weight. Remember earlier we looked at the font weight property, which allowed us to say bold or 700 or 800 or 400. We've also got italic as well. If you don't need italic, don't tick these boxes. You don't need it. So I'm going to have normal for body content. I'm going to have bold for headers. Okay, could be extra bold, whatever. And it gives us the page load. So if I say selected all of these for no apparent reason, you can see that the page load does increase depending on the size of these. But let's just refresh that and let's go back and hit quick use and choose bold and normal. Next, choose the character sets you want. You're most likely just going to want to leave this as it is. Because we only really need English at the moment, but you can choose other character sets if they're available. And we have three methods of now importing these. So we can either use the standard method, which is basically a link, in my opinion, badly formatted because we've got useless attributes like type, but we'll chop and change these around at the moment. So we'll look at each method except the JavaScript method actually, because we're just not going to go into that. We'll use import and link. So if you want to use the link method, you would basically copy this. You would paste it like you would a style sheet into here because it is technically a style sheet. I'm going to get rid of the type attribute because it's not required. And I'm going to use double quotes for the rel. And we can place this here just to keep consistency. So we've got another style sheet being linked in, but this time it's from an external location. So it's not located on our server. It's using HTTP as the protocol. It's going to fonts.googleapis.com/CSS family with the Open Sans. And here, remember, are the font weights that we chose. So we've got 4 and 700. And the thing I like about this is if later on you feel that you want to change this and say you want to bring in the 800 weight, all you need to do is add a comma, 800, and you've pulled in that weight. Or if you wanted to get rid of 700, you just remove it. So now we're pretty much ready to actually add this to our main style sheet. I'm actually going to move this up here. And inside of our main style sheet, it actually gives us instructions. So it says here that we use Open Sans and we use sans serif as a backup. Remember we did that earlier with the Arial font. So let's do this now. Let's say I want all body content to have a font family of Open Sans and then Open Sans and a sans serif backup. So we'll create a paragraph with some lorem ipsum, and there we go. We've got our really nice, readable, clean, clear Open Sans font for our body content. And you can see here we're making an additional two HTTP requests, which in my opinion is the only downside to this. The reason we're making an additional 2 HTTP requests is the first one will make a request to this Google hosted style sheet, which contains the URL for both the bold and the regular version, the 700 and the 400 version of our style sheet. and then subsequently we'll go off and then load them in based on this here. So you can see that as a downside, but the flexibility of doing this, particularly during development, is really, really cool. So now I want to use the same font family, but for my headers. So I'm going to say H1, H2, H3, H4, and H5, and I'm going to say the same thing. So font family, I'm going to set to Open Sans. It's going to be a sans serif backup, but obviously this time I want to have the font weight of 700 that we loaded in. So let's create an article here, and in here let's create an H1, and we'll say this is an article, and down here let's create a paragraph with some lorem ipsum in. And what else can we do here? Let's say text text transform uppercase, so we'll make this uppercase, and there we go. We've got, this is an article in our 700 weight. We can even inspect this and just have a look. So there we go, we've got Open Sans in 700 weight. We could change this, or we could just remove it altogether. You can see that by default headers are bold, so this doesn't make too much difference, but what we could do is, because we're loading in the 400 as well, technically we could just fiddle around with this and change this to 400. That would change that to this. So you can play around with it using your knowledge of the developer tools as well. So that is loading fonts in using Google Fonts. Let's now quickly look at this import method as well. So this is slightly different. What this does is it means we don't have to include this link in our markup if that's your preference. It might just be a little bit of a better method, to be honest. We can then import this in our style sheet. That's going to pull in that URL. You see that we've got this little URL function here, which we use to pull in resources from within our style sheet. And it works in exactly the same way now. Nothing's going to change when we refresh the page. It will be exactly the same. Head over to the network tab and check out what's going on. And you can see here that because we're using both the bold, we're now pulling in an extra style sheet for that bold version. But there's no difference between really having it in the markup or the style sheet. It's an entirely preference, really. So we've used Google Fonts API to pull in these fonts. It's pretty cool. It's really good for prototyping and just playing around with different fonts that you want to use. So you can use them to just import them into your website. And that's how we use fonts in web development.